Hello! Thank you for clicking on this video. If you've been to the channel before, thank you so much for coming back. I really do appreciate it. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. My name is Zira and I make video essays about different topics while painting something. If that sounds like something that you would be interested in, then please consider subscribing to my channel and like this video if you enjoy it. In today's video, we will be talking about CreepShow Art, aka Shannon, who in the past few weeks have been alleged to do some extremely unfavorable things. She was claimed to post horrible things on a platform called LolCow, which is a platform that I've never heard of before this situation. And to be completely honest with you, I still have no idea what the point of this platform is. From my understanding, it's just a platform for people to go and gossip and talk negatively about creators. But isn't that something that happens in the comment section and in Reddit threads and basically anywhere else? So I don't know, maybe I'm misunderstanding the platform, but regardless of my misunderstanding of the platform, she has been alleged to anonymously say extremely negative things about people that she openly speak positively about on her own platforms, as well as to make comments that are just all kinds of phobic. But far more seriously, she's been alleged to flat out harass, stalk, and mentally abuse someone to the point of them fearing for their life and their family's safety for about a decade. Now, all of this is alleged at this point, but I will say that the evidence that was presented to support these claims, circumstantial as it may be, is still extremely compelling. And a lot of different people have been coming out with their own experiences with CreepShow Art that help corroborate these allegations. True or false, these allegations compelled many to retroactively start seeking out the red flags in CreepShow Art's content. This situation essentially allowed us to open our eyes and see that CreepShow Art tricked us all along. But did she? Spoiler alert, in my opinion, no, she didn't trick us. And let me just go ahead and clarify that by us, I mean the viewers, not the actual people in her life, i.e. her friends, her family members, people in direct communication with her that have come out with their experience and how she made them feel betrayed. I don't want to invalidate their experiences at all, and I'm not referring to their situations. I'm talking strictly about us, the viewers. So to explain this conclusion to you, let's paint an essay. In the past few weeks, I've been asking myself, why do we often find ourselves so disappointed or even hurt by the wrongdoings of our favorite content creators? Well, an obvious reason is that we look up to them and expect more of them than we do the average person, particularly due to the size of their platform and influence. Another reason is that we prefer to watch creators who we can see ourselves in, which is why we tend to form such a strong sense of connection to them and why watching them grow and gain success is extremely rewarding for us, the viewers, as well as the creators themselves who are the ones who directly enjoy this growth. This is kind of a trap because this instinct of identifying ourselves in someone we will probably never meet allows us to paint them as overall good. We tend to automatically assume they share our values and our ideas of right and wrong, and that is because we like to think that we are good. Therefore, we will never enjoy someone who we know is bad. This forces us to overlook the wrongdoings and make excuses for them. If they are not in fact so good, then what does that say about me, who identifies with them so much? This is also what makes us condemn those who we deem to be bad, because it reinforces our perception of how good we are. Therefore, we are entitled to punish others for bad behavior. So in this video, I'd like to talk about social media and how we use it to construct a false image of ourselves and use CreepShow Art as a case study. Before I start presenting my point of view, let me be very clear. I do not support CreepShow Art. I will certainly not defend her alleged actions, even in the minuscule possibility that what she is being called out for at the moment isn't true. My point is that we never should have held CreepShow Art to such a high standard. Because honestly, her whole career was built on unsavory behavior, mixed in with a fair amount of masking and virtue signaling to keep us from feeling guilty for enjoying her content. And while the formerly mentioned allegations are far, far worse than the shit-talking, false narrative building, outrage mob-provoking content that CreepShow Art built her sandcastle on, this situation, mixed with other similar recent situations, made me realize we should take some of the blame for making her feel so invincible by letting her get away with so much. We should have honestly realized that if someone portrays such shitty behavior openly on a platform where most people try to present the best version of themselves, their behavior behind closed doors is most likely much, much worse. And how much we did allow her to get away with. Positive self-deprecation. CreepShow Art would make statements in what is obviously an intentional way of planting her image as a good person for years. She presented herself as a person who wants to believe the best in people, only to be let down by her own naivete as much as by other people's actions. Everything that happens to her is due to her, in her own words, not mine, stupidity, of always wanting to believe in others' positive intent.
Now, this was my friend, and I am the kind of friend who's dumb, who wants to believe her friends, even when they are clearly lying to her.
This is going to sound so stupid because all the shit I've talked about, but I genuinely still want to assume the best in people.
It gave just enough of a good feeling to her audience that it actually helped undermine any claim against her, and so is extremely strategic. While this is not the most conspicuous on the list of red flags we chose to ignore, many of her "I'm such a good person, it ruins my life" narrative was certainly inconsistent with many aspects of her character, and it is something I believe we all kind of saw through but refuse to really believe in. Baseless allegations presented as impromptu, passionate opinion pieces. CreepShow Art would often be one of the first creators to make a video about a person or situation very shortly after it had been exposed. Effectively, she was more interested in adding more fuel to any YouTube fire and jumping on cancellation and hate bandwagons rather than take her time to properly present a well-formulated opinion. An example of that is CreepShow Art's take on Jaclyn Hill and her father. Triggering hate mobs. CreepShow Art would very harshly criticize others in a way that orchestrated nothing short of hate attacks. She is very calculating in how she would present herself, as if her only wish is to call someone out for bad behavior, when in reality it appears as though she is only interested in sending her viewers to attack someone while simultaneously placing herself on a moral pedestal. For example, her "the worst Twitter artist ever" video.
There are a number of things I could critique about Shannon's video, such as 1. The fact that even though she claimed she didn't want her audience to harass the artist in question, she shows them their Twitter user anyway and puts them on blast essentially. Or 2. The fact that she personally found the work to be so scarring, yet shows it to her undoubtedly young fanbase. Or 3. The fact that she starts her video talking about how art is all about perspective, but in the same video hypocritically judges the artist for their work even though they use it to cope with trauma they dealt with as a child.
Falsely accountable. Constantly bringing up one example of her taking criticism well to deflect from other criticism. She would often mention her interaction with Omnia to prove how amazing she is at handling criticism.
For those of you who aren't as cool as I am and aren't already standing this beautiful, brilliant person, Omnia is a brilliant artist who runs an art commentary channel, and the first time I ever watched any of her videos was when she actually made one on me titled "CreepShow Art Missed the Mark with Her Apology Video," which obviously is a critical video of myself. I watched that video, I think the day it was made, and straight up, I left it thinking, holy shit, this girl's amazing. Like, she was criticizing me and holding me accountable things, and usually that's like less than comfy, but I left the video in a new state of mind and immediately subscribed to her because I saw her as someone whose opinion I respected and wanted to hear more from.
In my opinion, this was done to discredit most criticism against her by saying, "When the disapproval is valid, I have no problem acknowledging it and even praising the person who brought this to my attention. If I don't do so in other cases, it's because they aren't valid." Another red flag that has to do with criticism is how CreepShow Art used her past trauma to deflect from valid critique when one had nothing to do with the other. An example of that is how CreepShow Art responded to fellow art channel Toby's criticism of her. If you can't explain, deny. Publicly bashing someone without any attempt at understanding the context to then deny bashing them altogether when her audience becomes aware of the context, thus understand that the bashing wasn't fair. An example of that is calling Hello Leash trash in relation to her experience with Gabby Hanna to then deny doing so when it becomes clear Hello Leash wasn't the one in the wrong. Logical gymnastics. CreepShow Art has a way of making assumptions or conclusions, often via summarizing something more complex into a simple strawman argument. When presented with facts that negate the foundation on which her strawman stands, she makes very interesting logic flips to essentially double down. One example of that is her doxing or not apologizing allegations towards Hopeless Peaches.
Shannon has created something called a false dichotomy. She is claiming the only two possibilities here is that I saw Shannon's private phone number, or I didn't see full context of the messages and still made assertions about them. Even if the part with her private number needed to be seen for full context, there is no reason Peaches couldn't have just scribbled her number out. I could have seen the full context without seeing her phone number, but Shannon doesn't want to present that possibility to her audience. She wants to tell them these two things are the only things that could have happened, so that either way, Shannon comes out looking like the victim who was lied about or doxed.
Malice is humor. The most conspicuous is how her criticism was essentially extremely malicious, masked as sarcasm. She would so harshly criticize others' bad actions or choices, regardless of how bad they actually were. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it was very bad, but her way of articulating herself was meant to come across as humor, as well as to paint the contrast between who she's talking about and her own high morality. Essentially, she would shit-talk others because she enjoyed it and because it allowed her to place herself on a moral pedestal. Hypocrisy. She would absolutely trash someone for doing things that are just kind of shitty and absolutely tear people apart for their incapability to take accountability, while handling this as well as many other situations in the past in the way that she had been. You see, CreepShow Art, not unlike any other problematic creator, didn't necessarily change as a result of her growing platform, influence, and so on. It seems as though she's always been this way and was only able to get as far as she did because of us, the viewers. We elevated her to her pedestal under the obvious yet unspoken agreement that, much like other problematic creators, we will kick that pedestal from underneath her feet under the argument that she deserves it, only to secretly enjoy watching her fall. This is something that happened to many before her, and surely something that will continue to occur to many in the future, because influencers always have and will definitely continue to disappoint us until we understand that they are not the moral spotlight we build them up to be, much like we are not the benevolent spectators we like to think we are. And here lies the issue: how do we genuinely expect creators or influencers to be unproblematic queens when we ourselves are so far from being unproblematic? Let me explain this from my own perspective. I used to watch CreepShow Art until fairly recently. It was even her, for the most part, that inspired me to create content, specifically this type of content. The reason I stopped being interested in her videos wasn't the realization that she isn't a great person, because as I previously mentioned, that much was quite evident, but mostly because I stopped enjoying her content. I started noticing how repetitive her content is. It felt like most of her videos were her making the same point, the same structure, or most times lack thereof, and most annoyingly to me, the same joke, over and over again, until watching her videos made me feel like I'm stuck in YouTube Groundhog Day. There came a point where it felt like she's reusing the same exact script and only makes changes to the name and crime of the person or situation she discusses. I mean, there's a limit to how many times one can hear the phrases, "this entire adult human person," or "peachy keen," or "my dude," before having an existential crisis. Now, my point isn't to shit on her content necessarily, but to illustrate that despite how obvious her malice was to me in many of her videos, despite how clearly it was that she's using criticism or retribution to thoroughly destroy other creators, despite how visible her attempts of presenting genuinely mean and hurtful statements as sarcasm, those weren't the catalyst or the main contributors to my decision to unsubscribe. Because while I could tell myself that I don't mind the level of cattiness and mean girl style exposés CreepShow Art was known for, because it was just humor and that makes it okay, deep down I knew that a part of me enjoyed ridiculing others and watched them being exposed, and I reconciled that fact by pretending like it's fine to somewhat relish in other people's demise if I genuinely believe that they deserve it. I think we all have this sadistic part of ourselves that becomes entertained by other people's misfortune, and sure, that sadism exists on a spectrum, and that for most people it is manifested via gossip or calls to boycott. When our brain makes us feel like it's fine, it doesn't make us bad people. That person did horrible things like scamming their audience, abusing their power and influence, lying to paint a false narrative, even doing things that are criminal. Therefore, it's okay to binge watch a million videos absolutely tearing them apart and feel happy when we see that their projects start to fail miserably or their sub count drops drastically. It doesn't make us bad people, right? Well, yes and no. I set myself up there. There's really no way to answer that question, but it does, in my opinion, make us somewhat hypocritical if we refuse to see it for what it is. This isn't to say that we can never use comedy to criticize those who portray unsavory behavior, or that we should deem any and all commentators hypocrites for employing humor to address the misconduct of some public figures. There are many creators who do so in a way that isn't deceitful. One example, in my opinion, is Elise, who never uses critique of others as a way to elevate herself or portray herself as better or more ethical than the people she discusses. There isn't a hidden agenda in her commentary, and while she's extremely sarcastic, she's refreshingly self-aware. The trouble, in my opinion, lies when we use criticism of others to avoid self-reflection. If we believe that we are allowed or even entitled to enjoy watching someone's fall from grace because we have decided they deserve it, we actively distort reality just to avoid dealing with the icky moral conflict that this enjoyment represents. We paint this as justice rather than subtle sadism, which means we don't have to bother having the whole "what kind of person does that make me?" inner dialogue or conflict, which is admittedly a very difficult one to have. The problem is that it makes us hold on to a black and white view of the world without understanding that no one is truly good and no one is truly evil. All of us are flawed characters that need to reconcile with our own flaws in order to work on them for improvement's sake, not for perfection's sake. But more relevant to today's video, it makes us see influencers as either inherently unproblematic or greedy, self-absorbed assholes who abuse their wealth and platform. By not acknowledging that everyone are found in between those two opposite extremes, we end up overlooking and enabling bad behavior in our favorite creators because we deem them to be one of the good ones. Because we see ourselves in them, we have that parasocial connection. That is until their behavior escalates and suddenly becomes impossible to ignore, which is when we suddenly see them as the opposite extreme, which justifies our wishes of knocking that creator down and our justification for why our smiles get bigger the harder that creator falls. But what I realized recently is that the stakes are really low for us, the content consumers, because we get to have it both ways. We can enjoy the mean-spirited jokes, the unresearched bashing, or the tone-deaf actions because it's entertaining. The creators are happy to give us more of what we want, and we then enjoy pulling the rug from under their feet when they go too far. But it's never us in the wrong. We are quick to call someone a horrible person, but do we stop to wonder if we, who enjoyed their antics, are equally as horrible? Or are we exempt from criticism because we are the invisible spectators? Full disclosure. In the past couple of months, I've been becoming gradually more disillusioned with influencers, which is a bit ridiculous considering my age. It definitely should have happened a long time ago, but better late than never, I suppose. But the point is that recently I've felt let down by a good amount of entertainers I absolutely loved, and for some reason held to some standard of divine fairness, as if someone's number of followers is somehow an indication that that person is wiser and is closer to having the answers, or at least more decency towards what messages they put out to their massive audience. But that stupid perception hit me across the face like a wet fish when I realized a decent amount of people with an audience don't give a shit about much other than their own image, and don't even bother most of the time to make sure their actions and what they present their image to be like match. While I spent a good couple of weeks being furious about my revelation, which is extremely evident in my last video, I think now I'm reaching the next phase of acceptance, which honestly makes me feel even more stupid because now I see how ridiculous it was to expect them to be anything other than what they are. People with a lot of followers who are just as clueless as the rest of us, but with a lot more validation from their audience who interpret that cluelessness as wisdom for some strange reason. And they don't really owe it to any of us to be any more educated or fair or good. We should definitely not expect them to be any of those, at least. And the fact that we collectively give them so much power and attribute all of this moral high ground to them is why they are able to get away with so much and take their bad behavior further and further. CreepShow Art has always been this way. She didn't even bother hiding it all that much. And it's honestly telling that people say she got meaner in the last year or so because her channel kind of blew up in this time frame. So she got openly meaner and was rewarded for that by her viewers. And it is also important to highlight that most people began enjoying her content the meaner she got. So it's interesting how more people tuned in to this openly meaner Shannon, and yet we also want to play the CreepShow Art tricked us all this time card. There's a dichotomy between knowing exactly who you're dealing with, and yet simultaneously we expect them to be moral and good, to the point where we feel personally let down when their shitty behavior can't be ignored any longer. Again, none of this is to say that CreepShow Art's actions, both alleged and confirmed, are automatically redeemable, just because people expected more from her than they realistically should have, or because we chose to ignore the writing on the wall. That's not what I'm saying at all. Maybe she's altogether unforgivable and that's that. I think that generally bad behavior exists on a spectrum, and there is a world of difference between being kind of an asshole on occasion to tormenting people for years and causing the deterioration of their mental health and well-being, allegedly. All of us are without doubt guilty of the former, while still being capable of seeing the latter as deplorable behavior. Which is why, if the allegations against her are true, I certainly cannot use the cancel culture is bad or nobody's perfect, influencers especially, arguments, because I do wholeheartedly believe that people should be held accountable, and ideally should on their own accord take responsibility and right their wrongs. What she is accused of is certainly much worse than just being an ignorant influencer who tries to make everyone see them as much better than they really are, and I'm not trying to make these allegations any less awful or worthy of anger. Truthfully, this isn't really about CreepShow Art, but rather about the consumers of not only her content but of social media as a whole. We need to stop using influencers as a way to A. validate our own virtue signaling, and B. make us feel like better people than we are when they fuck up. We also shouldn't look up to them so much because it's very possible that they're not who they present themselves to be. Sure, ideally, people shouldn't abuse their platforms, and when they do, they should be held accountable. Some people think that since we are essentially the platform, then we are entitled to giveth and taketh away. We can reward our creators and we can punish them. So yes, CreepShow Art is not the role model we wanted. She never was. She probably always appealed to our own worst qualities. And perhaps we should accept some of the blame in this regard, or at the very least use this as an opportunity to do some self-reflection. If the allegations are true, and in my opinion they very much are, I hope she manages to make it right with the people that she hurt. If she does so genuinely, and not just to appease us, the judge and jury of the internet, I hope she can also be forgiven by the ones she actually hurt. hurt, Emily Artful especially. Nothing can take back what was done to her and the trauma she suffered, and I sincerely hope she can heal from what she went through. Now, I'm not much of a spiritual person in the sense that I don't necessarily believe in karma, but from my experience, if we harshly condemn something, life tends to work in a funny way where we will at some point find ourselves on the other side of the coin. CreepShow Art is notorious for holding everyone to the absolute highest degree of morality and is extremely severe in demanding that people genuinely take accountability for their wrongdoings. Now, she is forced to eat what she spent years dishing out times 1,000. If there is something I learned from the situation is that we should make sure our room is clean before passing judgment on other people's cleanliness. And while I'm not much of a Jordan Peterson fan, this is one thing I took from his philosophy. So this situation certainly made me examine the state of my own room and see that it could certainly use a good sweeping. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I hope that you found the topic interesting, and I also hope that you enjoyed the painting process of this piece. Let me know what you think about this topic. Do you think I was being unreasonable? While I was editing the video, I couldn't help but think that almost everything that I was saying is in a way hypocritical, but also not. So I think just in general, I've been having some sort of crisis. Like this video if you enjoyed it, or if you are like me and are having an identity crisis. Dislike the video if you didn't enjoy it, and consider subscribing to my channel if you enjoy this type of content. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.